Welcome back to Dogg from Air. I, as always, am your host, Evan Benton, and we're going to continue and conclude our discussion of the monkeypox scenario paper. And for this video, we're just going to keep getting into the nitty-gritty of the scenario, which is just ridiculous. So, it's not really going to be interesting for a lot of people, but I'm putting it out here just so that those of us who are interested, have something to refer to. This is where we left off with our last video, going over the diagram of the scenario. And you'll recall that, here we have a little bit of a write-up, so this will get us back up to speed. So you'll recall that we just have these random facts, basically. This is the scenario, and imagine you're sitting in this room with a group of people, and you're just told, this made-up country of Brinia, population 250 million, numbers, no immediate evidence of international spread, national holiday, monkeypox, right? And that's what you're told. So I think that this is, it's just offensive to common sense, really, that we would locate this in a made-up country and just expect people to be able to give us, a cogent opinion based on this dearth made-up facts here. And so right away, I just want to say that we're contradicting ourselves in the setup by saying, on the one hand, there is no immediate evidence of international spread, but also saying that the outbreak takes place during a national holiday with extensive domestic and international travel. So there's no evidence of international spread, and yet we just had a bunch of people traveling internationally. So are the participants just asked to dismiss international travel as a possible cause? The answer to that is that we're going to conclude in move 3, which is on the next page, I guess, that there is the germ warfare was the cause of this. So I don't know, it just bothers me a lot. But from a germ warfare perspective, standard operating procedure with germ warfare is to release the agent at multiple locations. The idea that one location would be the source is not used in germ warfare because that makes it easier to trace. They release the contaminant or an agent at multiple locations at once to make it harder to treat. So, and in the real world, of course, we did see the monkeypox show up in England and the other countries all around the same time. Of course, another problem with this is there's no other pandemics going on at the same time, which in reality we have multiple pandemics right now. Another problem is it's resistant to existing vaccines. Well, I guess we don't know that because we haven't deployed the existing vaccine, just approved. Now moves 2, 6 months later, according to them in January. No effective therapies or vaccines, which again we have. Contrast with SPARS, where we did have treatments for SPARS in that scenario. But now we have another fictional country, which is why not? And they are responding to this by shutting down mass gatherings, imposing social distancing measures, and implementing face covering mandates, as well as large-scale testing and contact tracing, and scaling up their healthcare systems, as opposed to the fictional artists, which downplayed the virus. So just a complete Goofus and Gallant scenario here, and that's the entire point of move 2. So they're telling the participants, well, the people that the countries that shut down their countries had low case fatality rates, or low cases, low deaths, and the countries that didn't take it seriously, well, look, right? And we know this is false already in December of 2020 when this was all spun out, the ideas for this scenario. But this is all that they're given, right? One thing that's interesting is just look at the smooth line here. Cumulative deaths just increasing at basically the same rate every day, as opposed to what we saw with the real pandemic, which was the big spike in March and April, and then a little bit of a spike in summer, and then a big spike in flu season, which definitely wasn't the flu. Definitely was not the flu, you guys. Then move 3, where this is the same graph, but it's cumulative deaths versus cumulative cases, so they're exactly the same curve. So like nothing worked, basically. Nothing lowered the virulence of this disease, and in fact the virulence just continues increasing over time in the scenario. So they find out in move 3 that it's a bioattack. Right, a whole year it takes for them to figure out that it's a bioterror attack that far exceeded the perpetrator's goals. So this is the idea behind the the popular assessment or whatever, popular opinion around germ warfare, is that it's just so effective that it, if we were to use it, it would be like a mutually assured destruction scenario. So think like War of the Worlds, where the aliens come down and they almost obliterate the planet, but then they open up their spaceships and they get killed by the common cold. Recent remake of that called District 9, right? And the same premise. So in the global cumulative case, so just far exceeding the perpetrator's goal, and at the end of the day, we've got 3% of the population dead from this thing a year. Wow. So that's like the most, that's even more deadly than the Spanish. What does that matter? Oh, and then we find out at the end, look, the specifically Brinian intelligence, remember that's the made-up country where this all started, reveals that the engineered monkeypox virus was developed illicitly at the fictional country of Arnica, leading institute for virology. So sure, Brinia. Oh, it took us a year. Oh, guess what? It came from the next door neighbor who hates us. And they're named after a herb that has, healing and pain relieving properties. That's interesting. I'd like someone to go through and do the, numerology on these made up names. Brinia, what's the other ones? Dronma, Cardus. But anyway, so yeah, so this happened when the population of Brinia was on holiday, traveling domestically and internationally. And we were told at the very beginning of this scenario that the international cause of this disease was ruled out. But look, the cause of it was in fact international, right? It came from another nation, across the border. You might even say it traveled. It must have been brought by an agent, right? And it was deployed at the train stations, yeah. So, they were told at the very beginning to dismiss a certain cause, and then it ended up being that cause. And this is just how ridiculous this midwit level intelligence. But here's a problem. Arnica's leading virology institute used publicly available scientific publications to guide their work. So here's a big threat. Here's an existential threat. PubMed, they're going to shut that down. Going and looking up your papers. That's it's a big problem that just people like you and I have access to these papers, because we might go and just develop a germ biological agent out of them. We might do some dual use bioscience research, as they say. And finally, the roundtable discussion. So the disease just ends. In this scenario, the disease just ends, and we don't know. We're at 3% of the population dying. Summary of exercise, discussion, and findings. So no regrets. We talked about it in the first video. We're back to that. No regrets. We found that worked. Not regretting our actions worked. Right? Threat comes from dual-use life science research, which is different from. I might make another video talking about my thoughts on the whole matter, but right now we're saying that the current pandemics came about because of global warming, people, getting the the bats coming into contact with the cows or the people or whatever, the livestock animals. That's what is randomly resulting in all of these diseases. I made a couple videos about that. So another thing that's terrible is in this exercise, the scenario arguably depicted a best case. So that is literally what they're arguing here, is that 3% of the population dying is the best case scenario. That is why we need to these biosurveillance networks, right? So, and they have such a flimsy justification for that, such a flimsy premise leading to that, to the extraordinary claim, virtually never before countered, except for in the cases of the Spanish flu, where we still don't know the cause. Still don't know the cause of the idea that it's the flu flies in the face of evidence, but that is another story. Biosurveillance. Again, it says participants stressed that the most important indicators for analyzing the pandemic potential of an outbreak are its epidemiology and the geographic distribution of cases. So I want to believe that the study designers or the scenario designers got a little bit of pushback from the participants. I want to believe that this sentence means that they said, hey, you can't just say that there's a made-up country where this disease starts. You have to tell us how it relates to the other countries, right? International community. We need to know how it relates geographically to it, et cetera, et cetera. But I have no way of. Now, we found that the best thing that happened out of this was doing all the things, avoiding mass gatherings, shutting down the countries. That was what really determined. We saw those graphs. That was what really determined differences in outcome. And so conceivably, that's basically all we can do the next time, right? And we need to develop a graded pandemic warning system. And that means instead of just saying, yes, there's a pandemic, no, there's a pandemic, we have the, whatever, red light, yellow light, green light system. That's what, like they say. Now, of course, the system that we're going to develop out of this has to be transparent, right? Transparent, which means a whole lot of nothing to these people. But, what they're going to say is that deliberations that currently occur behind closed doors would benefit if an outside expert group would analyze the data conclusions. So we're going to have one group behind closed doors analyze another group behind closed doors. Solve the behind closed doors problem by introducing another set of closed doors. That is what All right, now Outbreak Origins. Participants noted that biological incidents of unknown origin fall into a gap in the UN system. The World Health Organization, as one participant highlighted, is the outbreak equivalent of a firefighter, not a police officer. And this is a tragic metaphor when we're talking about covering the cause of an outbreak, because arson is among the nation's most difficult crimes to solve. Only 5 to 7% of those charged with arson are ever convicted. Fire rescue, I don't know, but I've heard, variations on this statistic before. The problem with arson is you burn the evidence. So, we're saying that we need to be less of a firefighter reacting to fires and more of a police officer preventing crime, preventing pandemics, pre-crime, pre-pandemics. And Lord have mercy. So we're not able to actually solve pandemics if we relate them to fires. That's what that all means. Yes, but anyway, so the international community requires transparency again. Keep using that word. No regrets. Keep using that word. You have to act with no regrets, says one exercise participant. Exercise outcomes were consistent with national performance during the C response, which we know was false already. We know that there was no, I can't say this on Wikipedia, but you can look it up. There was no relationship between whether or not you closed down your government or your economy and whether you actually helped people to not die. But I can't say that on another video maybe. As widely recognized, a number of wealthy countries with strong public health systems are not proactive and timely. They're talking about the C here, the responses, and therefore experience significantly worse outcomes than those nations that are less wealthy but responded more proactively. So yeah, we had 0 of the C in Africa, right? Because people in Africa, they covered their faces at all times, right? And another possible explanation would be that the numbers were fudged in those wealthier countries. That might be a correlation we might want to look at. But, you know, we're not firefighters, we're police officers. Okay, what is a trigger? This is a thing that they wanted to make a big part of this this scenario, but I chose not to really address it in my talking about it here. And a trigger is just, right, no regrets. And a trigger is something that leads to action. One participant argued action must be the default pathway because you will not have the luxury of waiting for certainty. So a trigger, what a trigger does, according to these people, is it's an event or maybe like a number of deaths that triggers an automatic response. And the automatic response is just that you lock down the country and you give up your autonomy to the World Health Organization. That is what a trigger is. Okay, so we need to identify those things. We need to identify the situations where we stop thinking. Literally is what this says. Stop evaluating the situation and we just give up, roll on our bellies, and submit to the World Health Organization or some other new agency. Of course, the highest priority is implementing testing at scale. This is false. And increasing health system capacity. Now, this is just scandalous, increasing health system capacity in terms of the recent real-world pandemic, because so many doctors were laid off during that. You know, so many doctors and nurses had time to, you know, do dance routines in the hallway and stuff. So, but we could spend all day digressing about that. And then this is just a little bit sad that I had to read this again. In addition, nations should ramp up production of the range of critical supplies that could otherwise cause bottlenecks, like happened in the current event. Masks, PPE, testing supplies, oxygen intakes, and ventilators. So yeah, they are saying that we should do this in response to the triggers. They're not saying here that we should stockpile those things just because, just in case. And then, of course, the triggers should address institutional relationships. That means that, you know, institutional relationship means one institution supersedes another relationship. So World Health Organization, the international response supersedes the national response. No regrets, remember. And then over here, you know, just in the context of what I'm hammering home again about the lack of medical doctors involved in this, we want to focus the triggers on large health response so we can understand the disease, understand what it is. And yet the premise is so far removed from the disease itself that, I don't know, maybe this is another bit of pushback. Maybe they're saying, maybe the participant here said, you know, you're designing the scenario wrong. We can hope, but just irony. Understanding the disease when the disease is like, you know, it's an afterthought. So here we are saying stockpiling. So, you know, I agree with that for sure. Dual use, I just highlighted this because this is a different use of the word, of the phrase dual use, you know, or where they're talking about the double-edged sword of bioscience being used to help and harm, cure, and infect. Ventilators, that is another scandal. Vaccine supply. Now here we're going to talk about how, okay, one participant offered a related vaccine supply recommendation that strikes a balance between national stockpiling and global coordination, selecting and empowering leading governments in each of the globe's regions. So we're going to use that vaccine supply to sort of make the regional powerhouses, right? So, and we are leading away from the Cold War, United States versus USSR, into a new multipolar world where we can say, hey, it's not about left versus right anymore. Instead of 2 big governments, now there's 5 big governments. So we don't have that problem, reaction, solution thing going, right? And a lot of people are buying that, and that's depressing. Dual use biological research, rapid expansion of high containment laboratories, BSL 3 and 4. So who did that? Who did that in response to the C? Russia. Russia did that. Interesting. We haven't seen any other countries. Haven't seen America do that. I can't say follow all the countries, but Russia actually rolled out a whole new slew, a whole new program, massively expanding their biosurveillance laboratories, dual-use research, and then participants agreed that although it is essential to avoid restricting legitimate biological research, we also have to keep it safe. So we really, they are just talking themselves into a corner with this part, which is kind of funny to see. We need to have it, but we need to control it at the same time. So we need to make it cheaper, we need to expand access, but we need to control access. I'm going to touch on that a little bit later, but here we have funders, banks, and funders cannot be the only arbiter. That's, so on the one hand we have funders, and on the other hand we have health organization, and that'll solve the problem basically. Multifaceted approach means, we don't have, again, the funders can't be the only arbiter, but we want to control that. So they're really talking out of both sides of their mouths here. They need to appear to have openness. They need to appear to have a multifaceted approach, but really that multifaceted approach is going to come back to bite them. Well, here it says, biosecurity measures would likely add costs to operations, which may be considered high or even prohibitive for small biotech companies. So we want that multifaceted approach, but everything we're going to implement is going to make it prohibitive for small biotech companies, so they're not going to be able to participate. We want your participation, help us, but we're going to put you out of business. That, that applies to the national, international level at all as well. And here we're at this part, providers of goods and services. So this is the double-edged sword, and this is benchtop synthesis devices. So making smaller machines, cheaper machines to do DNA testing, which they need. They need the testing because, as they've concluded, the testing is what works. It at least frightens people into submission, right? They have a pandemic of cases, as we've seen. Poses greater risks of dangerous research with no traceability. So, these people are going to lose. This is not going to work, and it's tragic, but also funny to just see this, that they are, their approach is just doomed to failure. On the one hand, they need smaller machines, they need to outsource this type of thing, but they have to control that outsourcing. They're so afraid of this knowledge getting out here. They're basically, that's basically the whole thing. And there really is a direct occult link here, where if you look at the secret societies, that's why they talk about initiation. They're really worried about this information getting out into the world. The information about DNA, about whatever word they want to use, biological research. They're worried, and just science in general. That's why they need to have these initiation. They need to have these loyalty tests. because they don't trust anyone, right? So they need to have initiation into their mindset, into their ideology, and failing that, they need to have like the massive centralized control, which stops you from being able to respond rapidly to these types of things. So again, we need the system we have now is fragmented, so we need a multifaceted approach. Sorry, covering up. We need a multifaceted approach. But right now the system is fragmented, so we need a multifaceted. Actually, now it is multifaceted, but that's a problem. So we need a new way of having it be multifaceted. We need to control that multifacetedness, that fragmentedness, with a new entity. And so this is good. They point to what they call a successful entity, which is the World Institute for Nuclear Security. And I'm of the opinion that nuclear bombs have been used in combat more than twice, more than just Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but that is another discussion. But basically, I don't know that this is as successful as they're calling it. It might be successful in controlling the flow of information, but anything else, I would be doubtful. Dual-use research of concern, dual-use research. Financing, bankers, financing. Here we're doing some neurolinguistic programming. We got a lack of financing, international financing, challenge of financing, linking to international inequity. Pandemics do not respect borders. I think that's a little bit too on the nose here. Sustainable financing, single pot of funding with real executive authority. So that's the kicker of this whole thing, right? It's one thing to have money, but we have to actually have we have to be able to back it up by shutting you down if you don't do what we say. And you can look up all the weird agreements that that Pfizer and Moderna made with different governments, regarding the financing for their jabbies there, but I digress. Private sector as a contributor, so it's not just tax money, it's also billionaires. So that's kind of good, I guess. And the recommendations, here we go. Global biosurveillance, transparent, which doesn't mean transparent. Transparency. Minimize unproductive finger pointing. So we've established that the governments that shut their economies down are good, and the governments that don't take this thing seriously are bad, but we can't point fingers, right? So that just doesn't make sense at all. But it helps to obfuscate the cause of a certain thing. In the case of like the current pandemic, we can't really go into China and blame China. So this doesn't mean what it says at all. It means okay. So I guess I could say then that the people not taking it seriously, to criticize, to point fingers at them would be productive, right? I guess. Transparent, evidence-based. And the triggers must be no regrets. National governments must adopt no regrets. And lean forward, guys. Lean forward. No regrets. Reality. The things that work are social distancing, mask wearing, large-scale testing, and contact tracing, which was kind of a big nothing burger in our pandemic, wasn't it? Adjustments to institutional relationships and decision making. Yeah, that definitely means authoritarianism. Whole of government authorities means dictatorship. And bureaucratic stovepipes that hamper information sharing should be eliminated. So watch out for those bureaucratic stovepipes. Those kill ya. World Health Organization should require national governments to develop national-level pandemic response triggers that are pathogen agnostic. So just like this whole scenario is pathogen agnostic, response is going to be pathogen agnostic. It's almost as if it didn't really matter whether or not there were a pathogen in terms of the international response. New international entity. Again, we've got the bioscience posing risk of accidents or deliberate misuse, accidents or deliberate abuse, misuse, abuse, bioscience, biological risks associated with technology advances. So here's the thing: we can't let people research DNA on their own because the DNA synthesis are the building blocks of dangerous pathogens, which might fall into malicious actors. We need the benchtop synthesis, we need the grassroots support, but we can't have the grassroots support at the same time. So we're just backing ourselves into a corner more and more. We need science, but we hate science. Universities and industry can use dual-use bioscience. Really? First I've heard. And we got to reduce the risks of public release of information hazards. So we got to keep people from reading scientific papers. And funds to address inequality. This is how, the money always is linked to inequality, and so control of the money is good. Control of the money supply is good because they have the wisdom to dole it out equally or equitably. So we have a number here. This is good. They put a actual price tag on this mechanism. We need $10 billion a year for the next 10 years. So that's $100 billion is what it's going to take to produce the result. So, it's good that they did that, I think. Transparently, again, the funds. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, and last mile. Oh, okay, this is where we just, at the very end, we tack on a little bit about supply chain resilience, which is probably going to kill, I don't know, at least millions of people this year alone. And again, we're not going to even have the word food or water anywhere in this thingy. And so last mile is just rich because that's why they're not talking about food or water, because a lot of food or water comes in that last mile, So they want everything to be centralized. They want everything to be dependent on central resources like the medicine, the pharmaceuticals, that have these massive supply chains produce, and high levels of tech involved in producing them. They don't want you to know that you can affect your own health by just the type of food you eat or just boiling your water, for example. Caring about what's in your water, caring about what's in your food, caring about what's in your air is nowhere in this scenario, nowhere in these people's minds that we can tell. So we're in the appendix. These are more expert contributors. You can read this on your own, and we're not going to talk about this. And then these are the people that helped design the scenario. In QTEL, that's CIA. But so Appendix B, I was excited to read, and then I read it, and I was like, bah. So this is the epidemiological model summary. This is how they modeled the disease, right? The monkeypox. Then you go and you look at the flow chart, and we'll just look at the flow chart just to look. I mean, this is it. All exposed individuals transition to mild cases days. So this is what this model, everyone who was exposed got infected, which is just, that alone just makes me barf. Not because I'm sick, just because I'm offended. So here's the flow chart, but anyway. Everyone who's susceptible becomes exposed. Everyone who's exposed becomes infected. And then once you're infected, you can either recover right away or you can go to the hospital. Or recover after some time, or need to go to the hospital, I guess you could say. So, these are, I guess, computer people, not not medical people, they don't know how that works, but yes, I was just disappointed by that. Yeah, so that's the end, and boy, I spent a lot of time. You did too if you made it through all this. Hopefully you watched on double speed or something. So just a little summary again, or a recap, would be that the ridiculousness of this scenario, combined with the fact that the people who are involved in it are not, very few of them are medical doctors. And I forgot to mention that of the 4 who were medical doctors, so there's 22 people involved, 19 participants, and 3 paper authors. And none of the paper authors, but 4 of the participants were medical doctors. 4 out of 22. 2 of those were double dipping with a master's in public health, so they were epidemiologists, and 1 was a PhD, and then 1 was Dr. Hamburg, who's very much a politician or a bureaucrat, we would say. So you don't have anybody who is just practicing medicine. And they say practicing medicine not to be cute, but because if you don't do it every day, or you get rusty. Okay. So none of these people, they have medical degrees, which is a lot of work to get, but none of them are focusing on the patient in their daily lives. And that I mean, when I first started getting into this, my background is in alternative healthcare, and when I first started getting into this whole medical martial law mess, I was gobsmacked to see that every step of the way, just the lack of practical experience, and just the fact that we've decided as scientists that we've figured out the causes of these diseases, okay, and now we are on to the epidemiological, right, the society level, dealing with them. We know how they progress in the individual, and that's just, we don't even need to consider that, right? We're looking at DNA, we're looking at molecules, so we're not looking at the person. I want to just go on and on about that. The transhumanism, which comes out of humanism, which puts the human at the center stage, and yet at the same time says that all we are as humans is we're just parasites, right? We're the disease. Mother Earth is the organism, and we're number 1, but we don't matter, okay? Versus a theological, like God-centered universe where we are in the image of God, and we are His sort of we're here to fulfill His will. Earth, that's considered saying that we're created in the image of God, considered to a what would you say? It's considered to be like demeaning, right? Demeaning to say that we're created in the image of God. And on the other hand, we say the truth, or it's at least not true. So the truth is that we were blorped out of existence randomly, Big Bang, evolved. Here we are, and we're the center of the universe, but we don't matter. And we need these massive governments to tell us what to do, tell us whether or not we deserve to exist. I mean, the decision-making apparatus, I guess, evolves out of all these people running around panicking for some reason. So I guess that kind of makes sense from that perspective. But anyway, this is going on right now. Okay, I mean, if you think that, we'll see how it goes. Okay, we'll see how the monkeypox goes. As I've shown, the scenario makes no sense. The people involved are not doctors, and so they don't really have expertise to this type of a scenario, right? To come up with these sort of plans, and that's the whole point. The people who are in charge not have the credentials charge. That's the most important take. So people are saying such a report, such a paper shows that this was all planned. Yeah, it is, but it's planned very, very poorly, and the actual science behind it is just the merest, barest of premises, which is being used to justify the crazy political stuff that's going on. We left science long ago. Unelected politicians making decisions for us, and plan. That is the plan. So yeah, if you made it through all that, boy, hats off to you as always. And my name is Evan Benton. This is Dogg for Mayor. Follow me for more existential threat related goodness. Please share this video, comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. Here on YouTube, BitChute, or Rumble, Odyssey, wherever you found this. You can support my work in any way. It would help me to. Thanks again for watching, and have a good night. Evan Benton of Dogg.